The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of a luxury suite in Cape Town, casting golden streaks over polished marble floors. Isabella Ndlovu, a striking African bride in her late 20s, stood by the window, her silhouette framed against the sprawling city skyline. Her skin, radiant and flawless, caught the light as she adjusted the delicate lace of her wedding gown. The gown, pure white with intricate beadwork, hugged her figure perfectly, emphasizing the elegance and poise that she had carried all her life. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, the day she would say "I do" to Daniel, the man she believed to be her soulmate. But a subtle unease gnawed at her heart, a whisper she tried to silence with the excitement of the moment. Her bridesmaids bustled around her, laughing and fussing over every detail, from the placement of her veil to the shine on her heels. Their energy was infectious, yet Isabella's mind was elsewhere. "Are you sure he'll be on time?" whispered Thandi, her childhood friend and maid of honor, tucking a stray curl behind Isabella's ear. Isabella forced a smile. "Of course. Daniel is always punctual. Today is no exception." But deep down, a tiny voice of doubt lingered. She shook it off. She had spent months planning every detail: the flowers, the music, the invitations, the lavish reception at the vineyard outside the city. Everything had to be perfect. She reminded herself that her trust in Daniel had never wavered, or so she thought. Outside, the city hummed with life. The streets were alive with morning traffic, honking horns blending with the distant call of street vendors. But inside this pristine hotel suite, time seemed suspended. Isabella's reflection in the mirror caught her attention. Her eyes were bright, but there was a slight tremor in her hands. The makeup artist noticed and smiled reassuringly. "You're going to look stunning. Every eye will be on you," she said, blending a touch of blush along Isabella's cheekbones. Isabella nodded, but her thoughts wandered. She remembered the small arguments she and Daniel had over the past few weeks. Nothing major, just fleeting disagreements about work schedules and wedding arrangements. Yet, there was something unspoken, a tension that she couldn't quite put her finger on. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the buzz of her phone. She picked it up casually, expecting a cheerful message from a friend or vendor, but what she saw made her heart skip a beat. A notification popped up. Daniel had been seen at a downtown cafe, in a heated, intimate conversation with another woman, hours before the wedding. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. Denial flared first, then disbelief, then a cold surge of anger. How could he? Hours away from their wedding, the man she had trusted completely, the man she had planned her life around, could betray her like this? Tears welled up, but Isabella's face remained composed. She took a deep breath, the cold air in the suite filling her lungs, and she knew one thing: this day, which was meant to be her happiest, was about to become a turning point. Instead of panicking, she focused. She would not cry. She would not beg. She would take control. And whatever she decided to do, it would be executed with precision, elegance, and an impact Daniel would never forget. Isabella stepped away from the mirror and moved to the suite's balcony. The wind tugged gently at her veil, and she let the sun warm her face. She allowed herself a moment to imagine the possibilities. The guests arriving, the music starting, the laughter filling the halls, and Daniel, thinking everything was normal, unaware that his actions were about to spark a chain of events he could never predict. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Another confirmation of his betrayal. Isabella's lips curled into a determined smile. She whispered under her breath, almost like a vow to herself, "Let the wedding begin, but on my terms." And with that, the calm before the storm shattered. The day that was supposed to be filled with joy was now a canvas for something far more complex, far more thrilling. Isabella was ready to rewrite the rules, and nothing, not the flowers, not the music, Not even the love she had once felt for Daniel would stand in her way. As the hotel staff began preparing for the ceremony, Isabella disappeared briefly into her private suite. Behind closed doors, she dialed a number she hadn't called in years. A shadow from the past answered, and a plan began to take shape, one that would leave everyone at the wedding, including Daniel, utterly unprepared for what was coming. The screen fades to black as the soft sound of wedding bells begins to echo faintly in the distance. The audience feels the tension rising. Something extraordinary is about to unfold. The early afternoon sun cast sharp shadows across Cape Town's skyline, reflecting off the glass facades of high-rise buildings. Inside the sprawling hotel, preparations for the wedding were reaching their peak. The grand hall shimmered with white roses, golden chandeliers, and silk ribbons that swayed gently with the soft hum of the air conditioning. Guests, unaware of the storm brewing behind closed doors, laughed and chatted, their voices echoing lightly against marble floors. Isabella, however, was far from laughing. She had retreated to a quiet corner of the suite, the lace of her gown brushing softly against the floor. Her phone lay open beside her, a string of photos and messages that confirmed Daniel's betrayal. It wasn't just the cafe, there were whispers of secret dinners, late-night texts, and stolen glances with a woman Isabella didn't recognize. Each image, each message, ignited a controlled fury inside her, yet her eyes, dark and sharp, were filled with something beyond anger calculation. She had spent years perfecting her composure, mastering elegance in the face of adversity. And now, that skill would be tested in a way she had never imagined. Thandi, unaware of the true turmoil, knocked softly on the door. "Isa, the florist is here. They need to arrange the centerpiece for the head table." Isabella straightened, letting a calm smile settle on her face. "Thank you, Thandi. I'll be down in a few minutes." As the door closed, Isabella's mind raced. She had to act quickly. Every moment Daniel spent blissfully unaware brought her closer to an opportunity she couldn't afford to miss. She retrieved a small, leather-bound notebook from her drawer, a relic from her days at university, where she had documented strategies, observations, and plans. Now, its pages would serve a new purpose: revenge. Outside the suite, the wedding buzz continued. Guests were arriving, their designer dresses and polished suits making the hall feel like a runway. The soft hum of a string quartet filled the air, blending with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional camera shutter. Isabella's gaze shifted to the window. From here, she could see the streets below, teeming with life. Every passerby, every taxi, every delivery van was oblivious to the drama about to unfold above them. But that was exactly how she wanted it. The element of surprise, the power of the unexpected. Her first move was subtle. She called the wedding planner, a meticulous woman named Helena. "Helena, please ensure the seating arrangement is adjusted," she said in a calm, measured tone. "Move Daniel's friends to the other side of the hall. Make sure the head table is ready for a small surprise." Helena, sensing Isabella's unusual composure, nodded without question. "Of course, Miss Ndlovu. Consider it done." Next, Isabella turned her attention to Daniel. She had spent the last hour tracking his movements via discreet social media updates, his own careless posts revealing every detail. He was still at the cafe, laughing with the other woman, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to descend on him. Isabella allowed herself a small smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, a predator aware of her prey. She knew she couldn't confront him directly yet. Too many witnesses, too many variables. The wedding had to unfold perfectly. Every glance, every toast, every step down the aisle would be a part of her plan. She reviewed the sequence in her mind, ensure Daniel remains unaware of the betrayal she had uncovered. Manipulate the seating and the order of events subtly. Reveal the truth at the most shocking, public moment possible. The crescendo of her plan would come during the ceremony itself. The very place where vows were exchanged, promises made, and trust built the ultimate stage for revelation and retribution. Her reflection in the mirror caught her attention. The woman staring back was calm, radiant, and composed. Yet beneath the surface, a storm brewed, fierce and unstoppable. Isabella clenched her fists momentarily, the silk of her gloves soft against her skin. She whispered to herself, almost as if making a promise. He thinks today is about love. He will learn it is about justice. Hours passed, each moment stretching like an eternity. The bridesmaids adjusted her veil, the hairdresser applied final touches, and Isabella moved through each step with the grace of a queen rehearsing a coronation. Yet her mind was elsewhere on the reactions, the gasps, the shock that would ripple through the hall once Daniel's betrayal was exposed. Finally, as the sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue across the city, Isabella descended the grand staircase. Each step was deliberate, measured, commanding attention without a single word. Guests turned, captivated by her presence, the bride, flawless, radiant, and unknowingly dangerous. The grand hall shimmered under the golden glow of chandeliers, casting intricate patterns across the polished marble floor. Guests settled into their seats, the murmurs of excitement blending with the gentle strains of a string quartet. The scent of fresh roses and jasmine filled the air, creating an atmosphere of elegance and anticipation. Isabella stood just behind the ornate double doors, poised and composed. Her African heritage radiated through every graceful movement. The way she held herself, the confident tilt of her head, and the serene yet commanding expression on her face. She adjusted the delicate lace gloves on her hands, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. Today would be remembered, not as a celebration of love, but as a display of power, dignity, and justice. The doors opened slowly, revealing Isabella to the stunned crowd. Cameras flashed, phones lifted, and every eye was on her. She glided down the aisle with the elegance of a queen, her eyes focused straight ahead. The guests whispered among themselves, unaware of the storm brewing behind her calm facade. Daniel, sitting at the head table with a smug smile, had no idea of the truth Isabella had uncovered. He straightened as she approached, trying to mask a flicker of nervousness at her radiant presence. He reached out to take her hand, a gesture of possessive ownership, but Isabella's hand remained elegantly at her side. Unmoved, the officiant cleared his throat, his voice warm and inviting. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Isabella Ndlovu and Daniel Hayes." Isabella's lips curved into a serene smile, but her eyes, sharp and calculating, never left Daniel. Every word, every step, every glance was carefully measured. She let the ceremony proceed, lulling him into a false sense of security. The first lines of vows passed, and the couple exchanged polite smiles, the guests oblivious to the tension that crackled in the air like static before a storm. As the ceremony continued, Isabella subtly began her plan. She had arranged for small changes in the program, moments that seemed innocent to the casual observer, but would amplify the impact of her reveal. A photograph here, a misplaced bouquet there, small details that would plant doubt in Daniel's mind. The music shifted to a gentle crescendo as Isabella approached the moment she had been waiting for. The vows. Daniel's eyes gleamed with expectation, his hand extended. "I promise to love you forever, Isabella," he began, his voice faltering slightly as a faint unease touched his tone. But Isabella didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let a soft gasp escape her lips, drawing attention to the phone she had placed discreetly on the altar moments before. A small video began playing, visible only to those closest, a montage of messages, photos, and videos that documented Daniel's betrayal. Hours before the wedding, captured in intimate, unmistakable detail. Gasps echoed through the hall. Guests whispered, pointing fingers, some covering their mouths in shock. Daniel's face went pale as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. The confident man who had thought he controlled the narrative was now the center of scandal, exposed in front of everyone he cared about. Isabella's voice rang clear and unwavering. "I promised myself today would be perfect, and it is because truth, Daniel, cannot be hidden." Her words cut through the tension like a blade, commanding attention and respect. The officiant, caught between protocol and chaos, stammered, Perhaps we should pause." But Isabella didn't wait. She had rehearsed every step, every word, every glance. She turned to the guests, her eyes shining with controlled fury and dignity. "Let this be a reminder," she said softly but firmly, "that betrayal has consequences, and that strength, grace, and truth are more powerful than deceit." Daniel's face contorted with a mixture of anger and humiliation. The woman he had underestimated, the bride he had thought would forgive, was now orchestrating the ultimate reckoning. Guests began whispering excitedly, some taking videos, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The string quartet's music faltered, the elegant ceremony now transformed into a theater of revelation. Isabella stood tall, her African heritage glowing in her commanding presence, every inch the queen she had always been. As the hall filled with a mixture of shock, awe, and admiration, Isabella felt a surge of satisfaction. This was her moment, her statement, and her revenge. The carefully constructed image of a perfect wedding had been shattered, replaced with a reality Daniel could neither deny nor control. And in that instant, the first waves of her plan's ultimate climax began to take shape. Guests leaned forward, drawn into the drama unfolding before them, unaware that this was only the beginning of a story that would be told long after the final wedding bell had tolled. The grand hall buzzed with whispers, shock, and disbelief. The once perfect wedding atmosphere had transformed into a charged arena where every eye was riveted on Isabella and Daniel. Cameras flashed, capturing every subtle glance, every tremor of Daniel's forced composure, and every flicker of controlled fury in Isabella's eyes. The string quartet tried to recover, their notes stuttering against the tension that now thickened the air. Isabella stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor, echoing like a metronome of calculated justice. She turned her gaze toward Daniel, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. "You thought you could betray me hours before our wedding and hide behind a smile," she said, her voice clear and resonant, commanding silence. "But deception always finds its light." Daniel swallowed hard, his face a mixture of panic and indignation. "Isabella, wait, this isn't—" She raised a hand, halting him mid-sentence. "No, Daniel. Today isn't about excuses. Today is about truth and justice. And maybe a little poetic irony." Her lips curled into a controlled smile, the kind that promised retribution disguised in elegance. From her clutch, she pulled out a small envelope, sealed with gold wax. She turned, letting the guests see the insignia, embossed upon it the same insignia that Daniel had dismissed as trivial, a mark of her meticulous planning. She handed it to the wedding planner, Helena, with a polite nod. "Open it, please." Helena hesitated, sensing the gravity in Isabella's tone, but complied. Inside was a collection of meticulously documented evidence, messages, receipts, and photos tracing Daniel's infidelity down to exact hours before the wedding. It was undeniable, each piece arranged to narrate the betrayal as if telling a chilling story. Gasps filled the hall. The murmurs turned into murmurs of disbelief. Guests turned their heads toward Daniel, whose composed facade crumbled under the weight of exposure. The confident groom, who had believed himself untouchable, now faced humiliation in front of everyone he cared about. But Isabella wasn't done. She had prepared for the next act, a social twist that would ensure Daniel's embarrassment was complete. She signaled subtly to Thandi, who had been strategically positioned near the projection system. A video played on the large screen behind the head table. Daniel, captured unknowingly, meeting the woman at multiple locations, laughing intimately, his betrayal documented from morning to afternoon. Daniel's eyes widened. A stammering attempt at explanation caught in his throat. It's not what it looks like, he protested, but his words fell flat, drowned by the collective astonishment of the guests. Isabella took a slow step forward, her gown sweeping the floor, her posture exuding authority. "No, Daniel," she said softly but with lethal precision. "It is exactly what it looks like. And now, the world sees it too." The tension in the hall reached a fever pitch. Some guests whispered in disbelief. Others exchanged sympathetic glances toward Isabella, recognizing the elegance with which she had controlled the chaos. Daniel's friends tried to intervene, murmuring excuses, but Isabella's gaze was unwavering, her presence commanding respect and attention. Then came the twist she had carefully orchestrated. The wedding photographer, who had been briefed in advance, released a series of images onto the screens, capturing Daniel's every misstep, his every secret, and his futile attempts to hide the truth. Isabella's revenge wasn't just verbal or private. It was visual, undeniable, and unforgettable. Daniel's face turned a deep shade of crimson as whispers of shame and betrayal swirled around the hall. He opened his mouth again, but Isabella interrupted with a calm, chilling clarity. "This is why today's vows are unnecessary," she said, her voice like silk over steel. "I cannot promise to forgive what has been broken in such a way, and neither should anyone else hear." For a moment, silence reigned. Every guest was frozen, absorbing the audacity, the precision, and the elegance with which Isabella had dismantled the facade of Daniel's life in a matter of minutes. Then, the soft sound of applause began. Not for Daniel, but for Isabella, the woman who had taken control, who had turned betrayal into art, and who had reclaimed her dignity with breathtaking poise. Some guests joined cautiously, others followed, and soon the hall was filled with a wave of admiration and respect for the bride, who had orchestrated the most unexpected turn of events. Daniel, defeated and humiliated, slumped into his chair. The woman he had underestimated, the bride he had thought would forgive, had become the architect of his downfall. And yet, Isabella wasn't finished. She had one final act, one ultimate reveal, one last moment of theatrical justice that would leave the entire wedding and everyone present speechless. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation. The climax was near, and the world had no idea what she had prepared next. The hall was still buzzing from the shocking revelations. Guests whispered in awe, some shaking their heads, others clapping quietly, unable to believe the drama that had unfolded so far. Daniel sat frozen, a shell of the confident man he had been just hours ago. Sweat gleamed along his hairline as he glanced around, realizing that every friend, every family member, every guest had now witnessed his betrayal. Isabella, however, remained the picture of composure. Her gown shimmered under the soft glow of chandeliers, and her eyes, sharp and commanding, never left Daniel. She had orchestrated everything to this point, but now came the crescendo, the moment that would seal her revenge and cement her power in a way Daniel could never undo. From beneath her bouquet, she produced a small, elegantly folded piece of paper. With a subtle motion, she handed it to the officiant. "Read this aloud," she instructed, her tone calm but carrying a steel edge. The officiant hesitated, glancing nervously at Isabella, but curiosity and protocol forced his hand. He unfolded the note, clearing his throat as he read. "This document is a legally binding declaration. drafted in advance by Isabella Nedlovu. It cancels any legal or social obligations between Isabella Nedlovu and Daniel Hayes. Furthermore, it authorizes Isabella to redistribute all wedding gifts, deposits, and funds as she deems fit. Additionally, it discloses that any future claim Daniel Hayes makes regarding this union will be null and void due to proven deceit and infidelity. What it shore, the hall erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and exclamations filled the air. Daniel's face went pale. His lips trembled. This isn't. You can't. Watch me, Isabella interrupted smoothly, her voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. Every eye turned to her, captivated by her authority and elegance. This day was meant to celebrate love, yes, but love without honesty is a lie, and I refuse to be a part of a lie, Daniel. Then, with the subtle precision of a master strategist, Isabella signaled the DJ to play a recording she had prepared in advance. The speakers came alive with the sounds of Daniel's own voice, confessions and messages that revealed the extent of his infidelity. It was impossible to deny, impossible to escape. Daniel tried to speak, to defend himself, but the audio and visual evidence were overwhelming. The crowd watched, stunned, as every lie unraveled before them. Friends whispered, families gasped, and the room filled with a mix of shock and admiration for the bride who had turned betrayal into a spectacle of justice. Isabella's voice, calm and melodic, echoed over the room once again. Let this day serve as a lesson not just for Daniel, but for anyone who believes they can manipulate trust without consequence. Truth will always rise, and those who betray it will face it publicly, with dignity and poise as witnesses. Guests began to murmur, some nodding in agreement, some secretly cheering. The air was electric with tension and respect. Daniel, meanwhile, had sunk lower into his seat, his pride obliterated. Every ounce of power he had thought he held had been stripped away in front of the very people whose opinion he valued most. But Isabella was not finished yet. She had one final act prepared, a symbolic, unforgettable statement of her independence and control. She motioned to her bridesmaids, and they carefully removed the veil that had once signified her union with Daniel. With deliberate elegance, she dropped it to the floor, letting it flutter like a white flag of liberation. The crowd gasped again, some with awe, some with disbelief. But Isabella's gaze remained unwavering, her posture regal. She had transformed the wedding from a celebration of love into a stage of empowerment, exposing deceit and reclaiming control of her life in the most dramatic way possible. In that moment, Isabella Nedlovu was more than a bride. She was a force of nature, unpredictable, unstoppable, and unapologetically powerful. And as the hall slowly quieted, the audience could sense that her journey was far from over. The day of betrayal had ended, but the story of her revenge, resilience, and triumph had only just begun. And in the corner of the hall, a few lingering whispers hinted at the final twist Isabella had kept hidden, a revelation that would leave everyone, including Daniel, utterly speechless. The camera pans out slowly, capturing Isabella standing tall amidst the stunned crowd, the soft glimmer of chandeliers reflecting off her gown, and the storm she had orchestrated finally settling into calm dominance. The stage was set for the ultimate climax, one that would be remembered for years to come. The hall had settled into a tense quiet. Guests were still processing the dramatic exposure of Daniel's betrayal. Some whispered to each other in disbelief, while others exchanged awed glances toward Isabella, the bride who had orchestrated every moment of this spectacle with flawless precision. Daniel sat frozen, his face pale, sweat beading along his temple, realizing that the facade he had relied on for years had crumbled completely. Isabella, however, remained the center of calm in a storm she had created. Her African heritage radiated in every graceful movement, the poised tilt of her head, the subtle sway of her gown, and the sharp focus of her dark, commanding eyes. She had regained control of her narrative entirely, and yet, a part of her plan, the pièce de résistance, was still concealed, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Turning subtly, she signaled Thandi, who discreetly brought forward a small wooden box. Its surface was carved with intricate designs, symbols of heritage and strength. The guests murmured, curiosity piqued. Isabella opened the box slowly, revealing a collection of letters, photographs, and documents that Daniel had never expected to resurface. This, Isabella announced, holding the contents aloft, is not just evidence of deceit. It is proof of the life you thought you could hide from everyone. Your lies, your secret dealings, your attempts to manipulate and control situations for selfish gain. Her voice rang through the hall, firm and unwavering, carrying authority that commanded silence. Daniel's face contorted in horror as he realized the scope of her revelation. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was a detailed unmasking of his true character, meticulously documented by Isabella over weeks leading up to the wedding. Every small lie, every manipulative gesture, every hidden conversation had been recorded, cataloged, and timed to maximize impact. The first photos she displayed showed Daniel at high-end locations with the mysterious woman he had been meeting. But the next set revealed even deeper betrayals, business deals manipulated for personal gain, promises made and broken, and messages revealing a lack of respect toward those who trusted him. Every image, every note, every message reinforced the narrative Isabella had painstakingly constructed. Daniel was not the man he claimed to be. The crowd gasped audibly. Guests exchanged shocked glances, some whispering confirmations, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Friends who had previously supported Daniel were visibly torn, realizing they had placed trust in someone undeserving. Isabella's voice softened slightly, though its edge remained unmistakable. Daniel, I trusted you with my life. I believed in your words, your promises, and our future together. But you have shown the world and me what kind of man you truly are. And today, that ends. Then came the ultimate twist, a live reveal that no one, not even Daniel, could anticipate. Isabella reached into the box one last time and pulled out a USB drive. This contains videos and correspondences, she explained. Everything has been uploaded and shared securely with those who matter most: family, friends, and key social connections. In other words, the truth is now public. Your reputation, once carefully curated, cannot recover. Daniel's hands trembled. He opened his mouth to protest, but Isabella's gaze cut him off. There will be no excuses, no apologies, no manipulation, only the consequences of your actions, and I will no longer be a part of your lies. The hall was silent for a long moment, every guest holding their breath. Then, one by one, applause began to ripple through the room, not for Daniel, but for Isabella, the bride who had turned betrayal into a symphony of power, grace, and justice. Her calm, commanding presence, combined with the shocking precision of her plan, left everyone in awe. And in that charged silence, Isabella felt a subtle thrill. The final act of her revenge was not just humiliation, it was liberation. She had not only reclaimed control of her wedding day, but also of her life. Every plan she had executed, every step she had orchestrated, had led to this moment of ultimate empowerment. Yet, in the back of her mind, she knew the story wasn't entirely over. There was one last twist, one final revelation that would leave everyone, including Daniel, utterly speechless. And when that moment arrived, it would redefine everything about this wedding, this betrayal, and this bride. The camera pans out slowly, capturing Isabella standing tall in the center of the hall. The soft glow of chandeliers reflecting off her gown, and the stunned crowd around her. She was no longer just a bride. She was the architect of truth, a force of nature, and the undisputed master of her destiny. The tension in the grand hall was palpable. Guests who had initially come for a celebration of love now found themselves part of an unintentional spectacle of power, betrayal, and vindication. Daniel sat rigid, his face a mix of disbelief, shame, and rising panic, while Isabella remained the picture of serene dominance, radiating control with every measured step she took. Isabella knew the final act of her revenge had to leave an unforgettable mark, not just for Daniel, but for everyone witnessing the unraveling of deceit. She allowed the murmurs to grow slightly louder, letting the audience sense that something even more dramatic was about to unfold. From the corner of the room, a subtle sound of notification alerts caught the guests' attention. Isabella's fingers brushed against the small, elegant device she had hidden in her clutch. With a slight tap, a live feed from Daniel's phone began projecting on the large screen behind the head table. The feed displayed messages Daniel had sent to the mysterious woman, meticulously time-stamped, showing him lying to everyone about his location and intentions. Each message, casual at first, escalated to outright deceit, betrayal, and manipulation. The audience watched in stunned silence, many unable to believe the audacity of his actions. Daniel's eyes widened, his hands shaking as he realized the extent of Isabella's preparation. How did you?" he began. But Isabella's piercing gaze cut through him. "You underestimated me," she said softly, almost in a whisper, though every ear caught it. "You believed that love would blind me. You believed I would forgive because tradition demanded it. But I am not bound by tradition when truth demands justice." She stepped closer to Daniel, her presence commanding complete attention. The guests leaned forward instinctively, sensing the approaching climax. "This wedding," she continued, "was meant to be a celebration. Instead, it has become a revelation, a stage where deceit meets its reckoning." Then, with deliberate grace, she pulled out the final piece of her plan, a stack of envelopes, each marked with a guest's initials. Isabella began handing them out, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the rising tension. Inside each envelope were truths about Daniel's secret dealings, messages, hidden transactions, personal betrayals, all tailored for maximum impact on the recipient. One by one, the guests opened the envelopes. Gasps of astonishment, murmurs of disbelief, and expressions of shock spread like wildfire. Daniel's friends, who had once supported him blindly, now stared at him with a mix of horror and betrayal. Family members looked stunned, their trust shattered. Every carefully curated image of Daniel's life was collapsing under Isabella's relentless precision. Daniel tried to speak, to regain some semblance of control, but his voice faltered under the weight of the undeniable truths laid bare before everyone. I can explain," he stammered, but Isabella raised a finger, stopping him mid-sentence. "No, Daniel," she said firmly, her tone unwavering. "There are no explanations for betrayal. No words can undo what has been done. Today, you face the consequences in full view of everyone who trusted you, loved you, or believed in you." The crowd erupted not with anger, but with admiration for Isabella. Their eyes followed her every move, captivated by the blend of elegance, intelligence, and power she displayed. It was more than revenge. It was a masterclass in dignity and justice. Finally, Isabella turned away, signaling the end of the public confrontation. Daniel remained seated, defeated and humiliated, while she descended the grand staircase with poise, her gown sweeping the floor like a river of silk and light. As she reached the bottom, she addressed the crowd one last time, her voice soft but resolute. Let this day remind us all. Integrity matters. Honesty is essential. And betrayal, no matter how hidden, will always find its exposure. And when it does, the truth will shine brighter than any deception. With that, she exited gracefully, leaving the stunned crowd in awe and Daniel alone, stripped of all pretense and power. The ultimate showdown was over, but the reverberations of her calculated, cinematic revenge would echo far beyond the walls of the wedding hall. The camera pans out, capturing Isabella walking into the sunset outside the hotel, a symbol of strength, resilience, and triumph over betrayal. The guests remain behind, witnessing history unfold, forever changed by the unexpected power and grace of one woman's extraordinary response to deception. The hall was quiet now, the tension lingering like a heavy fog. Guests whispered in hushed tones, many still digesting the extraordinary spectacle they had just witnessed. Isabella's presence had dominated the entire event. Her actions had transformed a day meant for celebration into a profound lesson in truth, dignity, and power. Outside, the golden glow of the late afternoon sun bathed Cape Town in warmth, contrasting the cold realization that Daniel would never recover from the public exposure of his deceit. Isabella paused at the balcony, the city sprawling before her like a tapestry of life and possibility. She inhaled deeply, letting the wind lift her veil and brush against her skin. For the first time since morning, she allowed herself to feel the weight of triumph, not anger, not revenge, but liberation. Thandi approached quietly, offering a supportive smile. You did it, Isabella. You controlled every moment. They'll never forget this day." Isabella turned, her dark eyes reflecting both pride and serenity. "It wasn't just about them, Thandi. It was about me, about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my narrative. Today, I proved that betrayal cannot dictate my path." Meanwhile, inside the hall, Daniel sat slumped at the head table. He had become a ghost of the man he once was, his carefully constructed image of control shattered beyond repair. Friends and family who had once admired him now looked upon him with a mixture of pity and disbelief. Each envelope Isabella had distributed had exposed another layer of his deception, ensuring that no excuse or apology could repair the damage. Isabella returned to the hall for a final moment, standing gracefully before the remaining guests. She addressed them with a calm authority, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Let today remind us all, integrity, honesty, and courage are more powerful than charm or deceit. And when someone betrays trust, the truth has a way of finding its way to light." Applause erupted, not for a wedding, but for Isabella herself. She had transformed a potential day of heartbreak into a masterclass of strength and strategy. Every guest who had witnessed her actions left with a deep respect, realizing that the bride who walked down the aisle today was more than just a woman. She was a force of nature, unstoppable and uncompromising. In a quiet corner, Isabella allowed herself a small smile. Her plan had not only exposed Daniel, but had also ensured that she emerged unscathed, stronger, wiser, and more empowered than ever. She glanced at the remaining wedding decorations, the roses, the ribbons, the soft golden lighting, and realized that the day, though shattered in intention, had been perfect in execution. The soft hum of the city outside reminded her that life continued beyond the walls of the hall. She could have wallowed in anger or bitterness, but instead she had chosen strategy, patience, and precision. And that choice had yielded not only revenge, but liberation. As guests began to leave, offering whispers of admiration and support, Isabella stepped outside into the evening air. The soft hues of sunset bathed her face, highlighting the elegance of her features and the fierce determination in her eyes. This was her moment, not defined by deceit, not constrained by betrayal, but by her own power and resilience. For the first time in months, Isabella felt unburdened. Daniel's betrayal, though cruel, had inadvertently given her clarity and purpose. She had orchestrated an unforgettable spectacle, proven her worth, and reclaimed control of her destiny. And as the camera pans out, capturing the sunset over the sprawling city, it becomes clear Isabella Ndlovu, African bride extraordinaire, had not only survived betrayal, she had turned it into an unparalleled victory. Yet, even in triumph, Isabella sensed a subtle undercurrent of curiosity, a lingering question that promised one final twist, one last revelation to close this extraordinary day. The stage was set for the ultimate conclusion. The evening air had settled into a quiet calm outside the hotel. But inside the grand hall, the tension lingered like a shadow. Guests lingered, their conversations hushed, still processing the extraordinary sequence of events. Isabella had already dismantled Daniel's carefully constructed life before their families and friends. But there remained one final act, a revelation so unexpected it would leave everyone utterly speechless. Isabella moved gracefully toward the center of the hall, her gown shimmering under the soft glow of the chandeliers. Every step was deliberate, commanding attention, exuding authority and poise. The guests instinctively quieted, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. She paused, allowing the silence to stretch just enough to heighten anticipation. Then, with a measured calm, she raised her voice, her tone soft yet cutting through every corner of the room. There is one truth that Daniel believes no one knows, except me. A hush fell. Daniel stiffened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He had thought he had been exposed entirely, but Isabella's words hinted at something beyond his worst nightmares. From her clutch, Isabella retrieved an envelope sealed with a personal crest, one she had carried discreetly all day. She held it up, letting the golden wax catch the chandelier light. "Inside this envelope," she continued, "is a letter I wrote weeks ago, documenting everything I discovered about Daniel's betrayal and the plan I devised not just to expose him, but to ensure the consequences were undeniable. And the final piece of this plan?" She smiled faintly, eyes glinting with mischief and satisfaction. "It is a secret only revealed to those present today." Slowly, she handed the envelope to the hotel manager, who began distributing its contents to select guests, Daniel's family, close friends, and key witnesses to the wedding. As they opened the letter, shock registered on every face. The letter revealed an intricate web. Daniel's actions weren't limited to infidelity. It exposed subtle manipulations in his business dealings, instances where he had lied under oath, secret attempts to financially undermine certain family members, and moments where he had tried to control situations to his personal advantage. The evidence was meticulous, precise, and undeniable. Daniel's jaw dropped. He turned to Isabella, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You planned all of this?" he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of his humiliation. Isabella stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, Daniel. Every detail, every moment. I allowed you to believe the ceremony would proceed normally, that your deception would go unnoticed. But I have always been prepared for truth to find its way, and today it has." The audience was stunned. Every guest now held proof of Daniel's true character. Some gasped audibly, some whispered, and a few even nodded in solemn acknowledgement of Isabella's meticulous planning. Her revenge was no longer just personal, it was a public statement, a lesson in integrity, and a display of power and intelligence few could rival. Then came the final, symbolic act. Isabella placed her bouquet gently on the head table, letting it rest atop the mess of evidence she had exposed. It was both an offering and a declaration. She would no longer carry the weight of betrayal, nor be tied to the man who had attempted to deceive her. "Today," Isabella announced, her voice strong and melodic, "marks the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, one built on truth, courage, and self-respect. Let this day be remembered not as a celebration of love lost, but as the triumph of honesty and strength over deceit." The applause was thunderous, not for Daniel, who remained frozen in shame, but for Isabella. Guests rose, some with tears in their eyes, some with admiration, and some with a newfound respect for the bride who had transformed heartbreak into empowerment. Daniel, for the first time, realized the full extent of his miscalculation. He had underestimated Isabella's intelligence, patience, and composure. He had assumed charm and timing could cover deceit, but he had been wrong. Every witness to the wedding now understood the magnitude of her strategy, the precision of her execution, and the brilliance of her final reveal. Isabella stood tall, her dark eyes glinting with both triumph and liberation. The day of betrayal had reached its apex, leaving Daniel exposed, powerless, and humiliated. And as the camera slowly panned out to capture her regal stance amidst the stunned crowd, it became clear Isabella Ndlovu had not just survived betrayal. She had turned it into a masterclass of revenge, dignity, and empowerment. And yet, in her eyes, there remained a glimmer of mystery, the final moment of closure, waiting to be delivered in the ultimate finale. The grand hall had transformed completely from the morning scene of joyous anticipation. It now radiated an electric mixture of awe, admiration, and lingering tension. Every guest sat forward in their seats, still processing the layers of betrayal and revelation that Isabella had revealed. Yet, despite the chaos she had orchestrated, Isabella herself remained the embodiment of poise, her African heritage reflected in her regal stance, flawless gown, and commanding presence. For Daniel, the moment had become unbearable. Each envelope, each photo, each confession of betrayal had stripped away not just his public image, but the control he had assumed over Isabella and the wedding. He now realized, painfully, that he had underestimated the woman seated elegantly behind her veil of composure. Isabella approached the center of the hall one final time. She allowed silence to settle, a weighty pause that amplified the significance of the moment. This day has been marked by betrayal, deception, and broken trust, she began, her voice calm but resonant, cutting through the tension like a blade. But it has also been a testament to strength, dignity, and the power of truth. Her eyes swept across the crowd, lingering on each witness, friends, family, and strangers alike. Every act of deceit has a consequence. Every lie eventually meets its revelation. And today we have all witnessed that truth. She turned toward Daniel, who could no longer meet her gaze. His arrogance, confidence, and control had been dismantled piece by piece, leaving him exposed, humiliated, and powerless. "Daniel," she said, her voice softening slightly yet filled with authority, "I trusted you with my life. I believed in love, in partnership, in honesty. But your actions have shown me what you truly are, and I will not let deceit define me or my future." Then, in a moment that would become legendary among the attendees, Isabella raised her voice slightly, signaling the final revelation she had been holding back. The staff dimmed the chandeliers slightly, and the large projector screen flickered to life one last time. A video montage appeared, showing the moments of her meticulous planning, the messages she had intercepted, the subtle manipulations she had set in motion, and the calculated steps leading to the exposure of Daniel's betrayal. But the final scenes revealed something more: Isabella's transformation through the day. From a bride on the verge of heartbreak to a woman commanding her destiny, radiating power, resilience, and grace. The crowd watched, mesmerized, as the montage ended with Isabella stepping down the aisle earlier that day. Her serene smile and unwavering poise, a visual testament to her mastery over the situation. Daniel's face drained of color. He realized that every attempt to regain dignity, to explain or to manipulate the narrative, had been anticipated and rendered irrelevant by Isabella's intelligence and foresight. A silence fell over the hall, heavy and complete, before it broke into a crescendo of applause. Guests rose to their feet, some cheering, some crying, all in awe of the woman who had transformed what should have been the day of her humiliation into the most unforgettable statement of empowerment they had ever witnessed. Isabella smiled, the calm of victory reflected in her eyes. She had not only avenged betrayal, she had redefined it as a public art of strategy, grace, and intelligence. Every step, every glance, every action had led to this moment, the ultimate reclaiming of control. She turned away from Daniel one last time, moving toward the grand balcony overlooking the city. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across Cape Town, painting the sky with hues of pink and amber. The wind gently lifted her veil, and for a moment she allowed herself to breathe, free from betrayal, free from deceit, and fully in command of her life. As the camera pans out, capturing the sprawling city below and the stunned but admiring guests behind her, Isabella's voice is heard one final time. Life will always test us. Betrayal will always exist. But strength, dignity, and truth, these will always prevail. And when they do, nothing can ever take them away. The screen fades to black. A few moments later, the soft sound of distant wedding bells chimes not for the union of two people, but for the triumph of a woman who refused to be defeated, who turned heartbreak into empowerment, and who ensured that the story of her day would be remembered forever.